By the mid-1970s, the receiver wars were reaching a point of diminishing returns. To hit higher power figures, manufacturers were cramming massive power transformers, sensitive phono stages, AM/FM tuners into a single heat-soaked box. We all remember the monster receivers. They were the centerpieces of our homes. Glowing dials, walnut cases, and enough power to fill a suburban house. But for the guy who spent his weekends at the record shop, or looking through the glass at high-end boutiques, there was a nagging thought. What do the pros use? In the studio, you didn't see wood cases. You saw steel. You saw rack handles. You saw separates. Pioneers saw that shift coming. They knew that to move forward, they had to break the receiver apart. They built a bridge between the living room and the recording studio. They called it the SPEC series. And for a generation, this was the ultimate someday system. The SPEC 2 power amplifier is where that someday feeling becomes physical. It weighs 53 pounds. But when you look inside, you realize that weight isn't for show. Most of that mass is right here, a massive toroidal core power transformer. While standard amps of the era used blocky EI cores, Pioneer used a continuous ribbon of silicon steel, wound into a single high permeability ring. Because the magnetic flux follows the grain of the steel in a continuous loop, the energy is trapped within the core. It's a design that cuts stray magnetic fields by up to 95%. In the SPEC Bridge, noise is the enemy. By containing those fields, Pioneer ensured the sensitive preamp circuits sitting just inches away stayed dead silent. No hum, no interference, just clean background that lets the music breathe. But look at the wiring. This is a quasi-dual-mono architecture. Even though they share this core, the left and right channels are isolated by independent paths. From the moment the current leaves the core, the channels stay separate. The energy moves into 4 massive filter capacitors, 60,000 microfarads of total storage. Think of them as a high-pressure reservoir that ensures the amp never chokes when the music gets demanding. When a 30 Hz note hits, the voltage stays rock solid. The energy is already sitting at the output stage, waiting to be unleashed. It's the difference between an amplifier that merely plays the signal and one that has the current to actually dictate the woofer's movement. It's that level of mechanical discipline that keeps the bass tight, textured, and exactly where it belongs. You can't trick physics with clever marketing or lightweight parts. To get this kind of control, you need the steel, you need the copper, and you need the weight. If the SPEC 2 was a muscle, the SPEC 1 preamp was the brain. And for a generation, laying hands on one of these for the first time felt like a promotion. You weren't just turning on a stereo, you were engaging a machine. Every switch on the faceplate is professional-grade toggle, not the plastic sliders or push buttons common in consumer gear. There is mechanical finality to every movement here. Then there's the volume control. It isn't a simple carbon track potentiometer that wears out and gets scratchy over time. It's a stepped attenuator. Inside that knob is a precision index switch and a network of fixed resistors. When you turn it, you're physically switching between distinct preset signal levels. This ensured that the balance between your left and right speakers remained identical, down to a fraction of a decibel across the entire range. It was a level of accuracy that was, at the time, reserved for the mastering desk. But the real brilliance of the SPEC 1 was what it didn't have. By stripping out the AM/FM tuner circuitry found in receivers, Pioneer removed a massive source of internal RF noise. They gave the signal path room to breathe. The sense of low-level voltages from your turntable or tape deck no longer had to live next to the high-frequency radio oscillator. The result was a lower noise floor, a darker background, that let the texture of the recording come through without the hum or the grit of an integrated chassis. It turned your DIN into a command center. It gave you the tools to shape the sound with the turnover filters and subsonic switches that actually functioned as surgical tools, not just bass boosts. It made you feel less like a listener and more like the person in charge of the session. So why does this setup still matter 50 years later? Why are younger listeners today, kids who grew up with everything in their pocket, willing to hunt through estate sales and forums to find these 50-pound behemoths? It's because we've entered an era of disposable audio. Most modern gear is built with planned obsolescence in mind. Thin traces, surface mount components, and power supplies that are meant to be replaced, not repaired. But the SPEC series was built with something we call structural overhead. Look at these heatsinks. They weren't calculated to just survive the warranty period. They were over-engineered to keep the output transistors cool under the most demanding loads. Decade after decade, the heavy-gauge steel chassis hasn't warped, the transformer hasn't hummed itself to death, the foundation is still solid. When we get these on the bench today, they aren't broken, they are just tired. Electrolytic fluid in the capacitors eventually dries out. Carbon resistors can drift from their original values, but because the way Pioneer laid these out, they are completely serviceable. For the younger generation, these units represent a great reset. In a world of plastic and software updates, this is something real. It reminds them that high fidelity wasn't always about convenience, it was about physics. When we restore a SPEC 2, we aren't just fixing a circuit. We're preserving a standard of manufacturing that simply doesn't exist in the consumer world anymore. We're returning the bias from the DC offset to a factory spec, ensuring the silicon stays cool and the music stays clean for another 50 years. It's a reminder that sometimes the old way wasn't just a style choice, it was a commitment to longevity. The SPEC Bridge was the moment Pioneer stopped making furniture and started making machinery. It was a declaration that the music deserved more than just a place in the room. It deserved its own dedicated infrastructure. Whether you're the man who stood in front of the boutique window in '76, mesmerized by the rack handles and the clinical silver, or the young enthusiast who just discovered what high-current hi-fi actually sounds like, the feeling is the same. When you flip that heavy power toggle, and you wait those few seconds for the internal protection relay to engage, you know you're about to hear music the way it was meant to be felt, not just reproduced, not just played, but driven by the weight of silicon steel and the discipline of '70s engineering. The SPEC series didn't just bridge the gap between studio and home. It built a foundation that has outlasted almost everything that came after it.